Well, hey there, and welcome to Wedding Planning Simplified. Happy Sunday. I am here today with Jacqueline. Hi, Jacqueline. How are you doing?
I am good. It's snowing, and you and I are very opposite when it comes to the winter, where I saw the snow and did a happy dance. You saw the snow and battened the hatches. So
Yeah, I am not a snow fan at all, so I was not impressed, but
it's not our
you know.
typical season. I haven't met many wedding professionals that are like, yeah, winter, because it's not what we get excited about. We get excited about
It's
wedding
very
season.
true. It's very true. It was a nice day to I had a cup of peppermint tea and put up the Christmas tree. And I have this ongoing debate with my husband. Anybody who's known me for a while has seen the pictures of his Christmas tree versus my Christmas tree. And I affectionately refer to his Christmas tree as the Christmas barf tree. And then he affectionately refers to mine as the sterile tree. So we're having the competition of the Christmas trees in our household this weekend.
I'm sure my mom would be mad if I told this story, but the amount of times that she would undress our Christmas tree as children and then redo it in the middle of the night, like a little Keebler elf, and then we'd be wake up in the morning and be like, "We're so good at this! Look at that beautiful tree!" She's just seething with her
Yeah.
coffee mug, knowing it's all her.
My tree has it's got, poinsettias and champagne and glitter and all of the beautiful things, and it's all very well coordinated. And then my daughter just hung all of her beaded necklaces on it. So um there may be an elf that comes in. I need to be less anal about the decor and more accepting of the fact that she's helping. So it's beautiful.
Hey, it's a good day to be talking about it, considering we're diving into details and moments and everything. So it makes sense you want everything picture perfect, especially
It's
today,
very true. That was an excellent segue. Well done.
right?
We are talking today about photos on your wedding day that you don't want to miss. And I think that this is a great time to be talking about this for anyone who's getting married in the near future, obviously. But even if you're not getting married until next summer, it's a really solid thing to have sort of percolating through your brain because you'll want to put some thought into the photos that you would like your photographer to capture. And I do want to put a big disclaimer. We'll probably say this several times throughout the video. If you've hired a professional photographer, they are going to capture most of this stuff anyway. And we always have this conversation with our couples when we're talking about DJs and photographers. You're hiring a creative professional to do the job of either capturing beautiful photos of your day or, keeping the dance floor packed on if we're talking about a DJ. And so you don't want to sort of handcuff your photographer creatively by giving them a list of 900 photos with Pinterest links that you need to have replicated. That is not at all what we're suggesting here. Your photographer, being a professional, is going to capture most of these things anyway, but there are some little moments and details that they necessarily won't know unless they're a mind reader. Maybe you've got your grandma's locket pinned to your bouquet and they won't notice it unless you draw their attention to it. So those are the kinds of things that we're here to talk about today.
Yes. And one thing I always like to warn when it comes to Pinterest, Amy has heard me spew about this a lot, is styled shoots. A lot of those beautiful photos that you want replicated have been replicated or created, in an environment where there's no wind, there's no freezing cold temperatures, there's no partner that really doesn't like their photo taken. They are hired models who are trained to make their cheekbones look like that while resting on a hay bale. It might not turn out. And that's also okay because you don't rest your face on hay bales every day, but you are in love every day. And that's what should be focused on.
Absolutely. And I think that that theme is going to pervade everything we talk about today. Just be yourself. Don't try to be anyone that you're not. Don't try to replicate those poses that models have been contorted into. So, this is the Pinterest trap that we're always warning against.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes. So let's dive right in here, Jacqueline. And we've made a list of some things to think about in terms of the people that you're going to want to capture on your wedding day.
Yeah.
So,
So
Jacqueline, if you
obviously,
imagine,
sorry to interrupt you, Amy. This
no, it's all
also
good.
goes with a massive warning where everyone's family dynamic is super different. You may have a very turbulent relationship with your parents, with your siblings, with your grandparents. we're not here to judge. We're not here to dissect that. So you might hear some great ideas today. You might hear some ideas where you're like, whoop, I'm going to get off the couch and do a stretch break. And that's also okay.
Absolutely. I think that you want to keep in mind, and this is particularly close to my heart right now, just keep in mind that nothing lasts forever. And where people are concerned, if you are having a tough time now at your wedding with a dynamic between you and someone, a parent, a sibling, a relative, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't get photos of them. If you can try to look past that and look to the future and the fact that nobody lives forever. I mean, I would give anything to go back. And the only thing I would change about my wedding day is that I would have had my dad walk me down the aisle and I would have had more pictures with my dad because he's not with us anymore. And I don't have any great pictures of just me and my dad on my wedding day. So don't be so short-sighted in making up your photo lists that you overlook the fact that you're going to probably want those to look back on in the future.
Exactly. And the same goes with not only your parents, it can also be your siblings. I know sometimes my brother and I, even though we're thick as thieves most days, there are days where I don't even want to send him a text back. But looking past those moments, realizing that, hey, these people have been in your life from literally day one. It doesn't mean that old saying where blood's thicker than water. We all know that that isn't necessarily true anymore. But there is something to be said about family resemblance, having those moments to look back on. And worst case, it's great blackmail. If they take a really bad photo, you've got it. It doesn't matter.
It's very true. I also wanted to point out, thinking about things from the perspective of your relatives. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. You might not realize that something is going to be really important to a relative until you actually accidentally capture it. And so what we're hoping today is that you think about these kinds of things. And the example that I can use to highlight this is that my aunt, who is a seamstress, she altered my wedding dress for me, and she has 4 sons. So she was never going to have the opportunity to help a daughter into a wedding gown. So on the day of my wedding, she laced me into my dress, and we have a photo of her hands and the laces of my dress. And it is so, so meaningful to my Aunt Yoka because she's never going to get to help put another bride into a dress. So thinking about things from other family members' perspectives like that, if you can capture some of those moments, it will be incredibly meaningful to those people.
Definitely. And touching on that as well, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be doing an actionable thing. If you just remember, hey, I don't think my mom and her sister have a photo together since they were kids, asking your photographer to capture just a few photos here and there of that is just a great gift that you're giving, which it's not for free. It is your time. It's your photographer's package, of course, but it's those little moments of connection that you're just persevering through and really preserving, in a sense, in your wedding gallery forever.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit about some tips for family photos in just a second. But first, let's just touch on children for a little bit.
Oh,
We're hearing increasingly a lot of people are doing weddings without children. But if you do have kids of your own, or nieces or nephews, or other special kids that are at the wedding, there is nothing more adorable than a photo of, a bride and the flower girl, or the groom and all of his nieces and nephews. So give some thought to capturing those photos of special children, especially if they are your children. Obviously, you'll want those included as special moments in your day to remember once those kids have grown up and moved away. We have photos from my wedding of my husband and his son, who was 6 at the time, and now he's 18. And they're so adorable. And we're so glad that we captured those moments and took the time to really focus on, just my husband and his son. And then the 3 of us, they're amazing photos.
that's great.
And that does lead us into talking about the family photos. Now, it's pretty common to do family photos following your ceremony. It's certainly not set in stone, but the reason that that tends to work fairly well is because your family will presumably all attend the ceremony and they'll all be a captive audience at the end of the ceremony. So you don't have to worry about saying, okay, we're going to meet at the university, and then we're going to meet at 2 o'clock, and somebody's running late, and somebody goes to the wrong entrance, and somebody gets lost and stuck in traffic. So gathering people after the ceremony tends to work well. You can also have your officiant make an announcement at the end of the ceremony because, you know, Uncle Bob might want to beeline for the bar. So we always recommend that you have your officiant announce at the end of the ceremony that, you know, cocktail hour will be starting in so and so location. Immediate family, please remain for photos, you know, under the oak tree or something. So if possible, try to find a set meeting spot for your family so that they know where to go after the ceremony. And I would advise you also to just communicate with them prior to the day of the wedding and let them know, you know what, you are immediate family and I do need you for photos. You know, sometimes aunts and uncles think, oh, they just mean parents and siblings. They don't mean us. And again, Uncle Bob beelines for the bar. Apologies to anybody who has an Uncle Bob. Um,
He gets
but
beat up a lot in our wedding
I
spiels.
know,
Uncle Bob and
poor
Aunt
Uncle.
Susie, wherever you are great people. Know that.
Yeah, sorry. So communication is never a bad thing in our books. So if you can please talk to those people beforehand, let your cousins know that, yeah, you do want them for a family photo. And it doesn't have to take forever, but just let them know that, yes, they are required immediately after the ceremony so that they don't take off and then have to be wrangled up later, which of course is going to waste time. I would also suggest, in terms of saving time, again, every wedding is different. And so you'll have your own itinerary to follow. But presumably, you'd like to get through the family photos as quickly as you can so that your family can go enjoy the cocktail hour. And so that you and your new spouse can perhaps do some more photos, or maybe you can join the cocktail hour and mingle as well. So being efficient with the time is going to be really important. And there are two things that I would suggest for time efficiency. One is to again have a place to gather, but after the recessional, if you and your partner can recess directly to that location, do not pass go, do not collect $200. It's going to prevent you from getting in that crush of guests who just want to congratulate you. And it's totally legit and understandable, and we get it. You want to spend time with those people too. They're special enough to be invited to your wedding. You want to talk to them and hug them and all of the things. But if you can avoid that right after the ceremony before family photos and maybe go to the cocktail hour to mingle, or maybe go table to table during dinner, that's going to save an unintentional receiving line kind of situation from happening, which is going to eat into your photo time. So that's time saver number one. And then time saver number two is going to be to, before the wedding, come up with a really clear family photo list. Your photographer will probably ask you for this, and they may give you some guidance to creating one. But the things to keep in mind are that you want to write it down so that you don't, in the heat of the moment, forget somebody that you're going to regret for the rest of your life. And so that your photographer or your photographer's assistant, or, you know, your second cousin once removed, whoever's doing the wrangling of your family, can just go through the list and really, in very quick succession, hopefully, you can move through all of those family photos and not waste a ton of time gathering people up. So the way that you'll want to structure that list in most cases is from largest group down to smallest group. So think of it like a funnel. As soon as your aunts and uncles and cousins are done in that big group, they can take off to the bar, and then you don't have a ton of people standing around distracting you, and they can go enjoy the cocktail hour. So biggest group to smallest group, with the caveat that you'll probably want to do any elderly guests or family with mobility problems first so that they can maybe go have a seat at the cocktail hour. And you might want to do the littles first as well. If you've ever been in the room with a toddler, you know that they're pretty volatile and their attention spans are pretty small. So if you can do, you know, flower girl, ring bearer, small nieces and nephews, or your own children, if they're small first, and then maybe send them with grandparents, that's going to help you to be as efficient as possible with those family photos.
As we know, weddings are long days. They're even longer days for our littlest guest. So typically those wedding photos, those family photos are happening around 3:30, 4 o'clock. And if they've been up since 8 in the morning surrounded by people, that's a lot of stimulation. A good nap time, some time alone with the snack bar is highly recommended to get those sugars back up.
Absolutely. Snacks are so important. I actually did a wedding a couple of years ago, and we were sending a whole wagon full of little flower girls and ring bearers down the aisle. And the strategy to keep them contained was cheese. So I
Me
had,
too. Same.
it's true. I mean, I go anywhere for cheese. So the planners and I had our hands full of, like bouquets and ring bearer pillows and cheese strings. And that's how we got the kids down the
That's
aisle.
perfect.
Yeah. So, in any case, thinking about those family photos, because it can be a very time consuming part of the day if it's not well organized, thinking about that before and making sure that you get your photographer a list and your wedding planner a list. That'll help slim down that time frame dramatically.
Absolutely. And try to be specific with the list. Don't just go sister one, sister two. Take it from a wedding planner. I don't know your ranking systems of your siblings. I know their names.
Yeah. And if we can yell out Susie and Bobby as opposed to sister and brother, it's going to be a lot more efficient as well.
Yes.
Now, let's talk a little bit about photo locations. There are, of course, many ways that you could go with this, but we often see people who are doing photos off-site choose meaningful locations. Sometimes it's a family property if there's one close by. Sometimes it's a school where you met. Sometimes it's taking your groomsmen to a basketball court and getting some pictures of, you shooting hoops in your tuxes, which as a wedding planner produces really awesome photos, but it's terrifying the hour before the ceremony to wonder if one of the groomsmen is going to come back with a busted knee.
I was just gonna
So
say with like a little rip in their dress pants, little skinned knee.
yes, exactly. So thinking though about meaningful places for you and your spouse or you and your wedding party, maybe it's where you met, maybe it's your favorite restaurant. You'll want to think about whether you want those photos to be in a rural setting or in an urban setting. Again, being true to who you are and not trying to appear as though you're, super hip, chill couple with, graffiti in the background, if really you're more comfortable in your horse barn or walking through the woods. So choosing places that are reflective of you as a couple. You'll also want to think about the distances between those places. We all know that wedding days go so quickly and you're so pressed for time. So, thinking about travel between photo locations. If you have downtown locations, is traffic going to be a problem? Is there construction you're going to need to worry about? Is there a festival or a hockey tournament or something going on that day that's going to result in increased traffic and it's going to slow you down? If you're doing photos at a park that's really a popular location for wedding parties to take photos, are you going to have to stand in line and wait for that waterfall because you want the waterfall in the back of the pictures, but there are 3 wedding parties in line ahead of you? There's a venue here in London, I'm thinking of the old courthouse, where they do weddings, but it's also a really popular place to get photos taken. You can't really book it. You can't really sort of reserve space. The couple who has booked that venue has first right of refusal. So you can't necessarily kick them out to get your photos. So making sure that you talk through your locations with your photographer. And if there's a permit required, you need to get the permit. If there are likely to be other couples there, you need to book extra time. Jillian's mentioning Civic Gardens. That's the same thing. It's a very popular place for photos. So thinking about maybe allowing some extra time or maybe adjusting your photo schedule so that you're not there at the same time as a lot of other couples are going to be. And then the other thing is having a really solid rain backup. If your only photo locations are outside, what are you going to do if the weather is bad? And this is a tough one because there aren't a lot of buildings that are okay with just having wedding parties come traipsing in and using their space. But it's definitely worth calling around, talking to your photographer, asking what they've done in your general vicinity if weather is a problem and you can't be outside. I've had wedding parties do photos in greenhouses. I've had to sweet talk the front desk manager of hotels to let us go in and take photos in their lobby, even though we weren't staying there. So depending on the persuasiveness of your wedding planner and your photographer, you might be able to finagle a deal in terms of locations that wouldn't ordinarily allow photos. If you're near a university or a college campus, sometimes there are buildings that are open, but you never want to count on that. I know here in town, the university tends to lock up their buildings on the weekend. So if you're concerned and want to have a rain plan like that, you might need to call security the week before and say, hey, is this a possibility?
And recognizing that having a rain plan is great, having umbrellas are great, but umbrellas protect the top half of you and your beautiful attire. It does not protect the bottom half of you. So you might think we'll be fine, we have umbrellas. Your dress does not have a custom built-in tarp system to keep it clean for ceremony if you're doing your photos in the rain before your ceremony. So be aware of all of those things. Like Amy said, try to have a backup for an indoor location, even if it is just a place to run in for freedom for 20 minutes while it's going to downpour. Just making sure you plan ahead is so crucial, but also having that flexibility to go with the flow. Because as we can see with the blizzard outside, you can't always predict what the weather's going to do weeks in advance.
Absolutely. You can get some awfully cute photos with rain boots if you're prepared with rain boots for your entire wedding party. I also always have a clear shower curtain in my kit because if it happens to be muddy, you can spread that out on the ground, protect the dresses, and hopefully your photographer can kind of work around it so that it's not obtrusive in your photos.
Exactly.
All right, so let's talk now about some details that we're going to make sure we want to get. We know that detail shots aren't necessarily important to everyone, and we're certainly not saying you need to pay your photographer for an extra hour and a half to capture a ton of detail shots if you don't care about them. But if you are the kind of person who has put hours and hours and hours into planning all of these special little details, you're going to make sure that you want them captured.
Sorry to interrupt you, Sarah. I just wanted to give you credit where credit's due. That clear shower curtain trick, I've used it. It is genius. Genius, genius. But thank you, Sarah, for giving credit where credit's due. But also, clear shower curtains can get you far. The rain boots, especially, spare shoes. Because, yes, rain boots are great, but we know they get little toesies cold. Sorry to jump back on the rain, but while you're having water issues, I thought I'd
having hairball issues, apparently. Sorry about that. So again, the detail shots are something that you may want to capture if you've spent an awful lot of time on those details. It's also, and this is ourselves being purely selfish right now. It's a really great way to thank your vendors. We have the tipping debate, we have the thank you card debate constantly, but your vendors will be so appreciative of great photos of the hard work that they've done to make sure that your day is perfect. So even if you're not intending to, blow up a picture of your shoes and your purse and hang it on the wall, it's something that might be meaningful for you in the future. As we say, photos are your lasting memories. And so these are the only things you're going to have when you're trying to explain what your wedding day looked like to your grandchildren in 50 years. So details are something that we always love to have captured, and we're always making sure that the photographer has time in their schedule. But it's something that you might want to think about to make sure that you add on your list, particularly if there are special details, like, for instance, your stationery. Jacqueline, do you want to hit stationery quickly?
Stationery and I have a very interesting relationship in the fact that I, with a lot of you, think it's absolutely beautiful. But I also, while drinking out of a reusable water, recognize that is a lot of paper and plastic getting mailed out, ultimately to be on a fridge for a year and then potentially thrown out. But if I have a photo of it to last forever and I can explain to people why I chose to go with that particular font, or being able to just relive the excitement I had when designing it, I can justify it a bit more. Having the idea that it is not only an incredible detail because it kind of hints at the theme of your wedding as well as your color palette, but it's the excitement. We all love getting mail, but also being able to look back on that for years and years to come proves a little bit more, to me at least, that the love and the labor and the cost wasn't necessarily all for it to sit on a fridge and then be recycled.
And we know we have some stationary junkies. I'm one of them. Marissa, if you're listening, shout out to stationary junkies out there. But it doesn't have to be just, a photo of your invitation. It's a nice thing to bring to create sort of a flat layer, a collage for your photographer during the getting ready part of your photos. So taking your invitation and your rings and your perfume and the clutch that you're going to carry on the day, photographers can make a really beautiful arrangement of that, capture all of those details in one beautiful shot. And then it's not like we're just taking photos of invitations, because that might seem a little bit strange to you if
Definitely.
you're not a stationary person. But then you're also going to want to capture the reception stationery. So if you've got place cards or a really creative seating chart, or some kind of really cool table numbers, you'll want to make sure that those details are captured also. And that leads us into tablescapes, which I freely admit that my favorite part of a wedding is when the flowers go on the tables, because it makes such a difference. But if you can capture some photos of those tablescapes, including your centerpieces, your table numbers, your place settings, particularly if you've upgraded your table settings to include charger plates or fancy flatware. So capturing those details is something that is very important to vendors, and which you'll also enjoy looking back on in the future. But you have to make sure that you give your photographer time to do it, because while we love our wedding guests, as soon as they get into that reception space, they're just going to mess it up.
They
They're going to
will.
move their place card, they're going to hang their coat off the back of the chair. And so trying to make sure that you have time for your photographer to capture those details before guests get in, and that goes for both ceremony and reception, is really important.
And Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but where I, at least this year, saw a lot of my own couple's personalities and kind of customization for everything was in their tablescapes. I had
Mm-hmm.
a amazing couple, Leslie, if you're still listening to our videos, their table numbers were actually little NASCARs, because that was what
Mm-hmm.
they really enjoyed doing as a couple. And I am so excited. I know that I probably posted them on our Instagram before, but every time I go through their particular gallery, every single thing was thought of. And I can see, oh, I didn't even realize that she loved that color of blue, but it's in her invitations and it's in her flowers and it's in their tablescapes. Wow, like that is so Leslie. So being able to have not only yourself, but your vendors and your friends and your family who you share this gallery with, having those little tablescapes and the stationery, it helps tell the story of what your wedding day really was versus just a beautiful collection of family photos. Gives a little bit more.
For sure. Another thing that you're going to want to make sure you capture is your hair and makeup and your attire. And these are often, kind of hand in hand. But your makeup artist, particularly, and your hairstylist will be very thankful if you're able to get some kind of great, artistic shot of you looking up at the camera with, your makeup being shown off and your hairstyle. And often that's when you're already in your beautiful attire as well. It's going to be something that in future years, I mean, I love showing my daughter my pictures of our wedding and the way that we looked on the day, and see how toned mommy's arms were. I
See how
mean,
much hair
you're
dad had.
yeah, you're probably going to want to look back on what is likely your most confident, beautiful day. I mean, I'm speaking from personal experience, but capturing those photos is probably goes without saying, but is also important.
Yes, they're good to
Um,
look back on. It's your first little red carpet moment, unless we've got Bradgelina listening to us today. But own it. It's okay to be a little bit selfish where you're like, I know my eyelashes will never be this long again. Please, someone take a picture of this.
very, very true. We've got a couple of other things to think about here in terms of details. Heirlooms are one that you may or may not be including, but we all know the famous something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, and the one that's always forgotten, and a sixpence in your shoe. But if you have borrowed something, or if you have something old, maybe you're wearing grandma's pearls, or you've got, your mom's veil, or you've got a cake topper that was used by one of your family members in the past. Maybe you've sewn a little heart made out of your dad's wedding tie into the back of your dress. Those are kinds of things that you're going to want to capture as well. So again, those are the things that your photographer might not know about. If you've sewn something into the lining of your dress, they might never notice it unless you specifically say, hey, this is there, please make sure you get a photo of it.
Being clear is being kind. Be open, be transparent, talk about your priorities. We'll dive into that later, but being clear is being kind. So tell us of these beautiful details.
For sure. I think the last kind of thing we've got in this category is something that a lot of people don't think about, and that's capturing photos of your transportation. If you happen to be in a limo, or I've even had whole wedding parties take school buses because the couple were teachers and it was super cute and meaningful. There's not often a lot of space in a limo for a photographer or a videographer to travel with you. But if you can even do like a lap around the block and capture some really fun, laid back moments in that limo or in that bus or however you're getting from place to place, those can be some really fun, sort of candid shots to remember how you felt on the day.
Definitely. And speaking of candid, I know we've brushed through this. We're hopeful that we can write a bit more of a concise blog post to give everybody a better sense of what we're talking about. But when you have interactions with your vendors on the day, and if they are genuine, maybe you're lucky enough and you get the opportunity to take a photo with your limo driver because you had a wicked time. Those are also great ways to just spend an extra little bit of time, not only with that vendor, but a great way to send them a thank you, because it's very hard to get content these days. So thinking from a strictly social media standpoint, I know that that would make all the difference for a lot of vendors right now.
And it's often, I mean, I would love a photo with every couple that we work with, but I never want to bother you on your wedding day. I don't want
Exactly.
to make it about me. But if you say, hey, let's grab a quick shot, that would be great. And so, very appreciated from your
Exactly.
vendors. Now, we will, as Jacqueline mentioned, we will be publishing a blog about this soon. So we're not going to go through, point by point, all of the moments that you're going to want to capture, but certainly do think about those moments that are going to be really important to remember and look back on in the future. So those would include the firsts, the first time maybe you and your dad see each other, or you and your mom, or you and your wedding party, the first time you see each other, whether that's at the end of the aisle or whether you're doing a first look, maybe your first glance at the reception site. If you have a chance to go in and see the reception site before your guests get in and, as we said, mess it up. That's a great shot, particularly if you've put a lot of effort into the floral and decor elements of that reception site. You're also going to want to ask your photographer to capture reactions of important people. So, the reactions of your parents during the ceremony, the reactions of your grandparents, all kinds of personal interactions that, again, are often candid. If you have some time to meet or to attend the cocktail hour, then your photographer is going to get lots of great candid shots. But making sure that you're clear about who those important people are that you specifically want shots with. Of course, we've got the obvious ones that nobody's going to miss, first dances, your speeches, your grand exit if you're doing one. Some other things, though, that you might not have thought about are those, again, bringing in the way that other people are going to feel and the things that are going to be special to them. So there's a great photo that I really like to encourage my couples to get. And if you've got multiple generations, it's the photo of the hands. Like maybe you've got grandma's hand with her wedding ring and mom's hand and your hand with your new wedding ring, or maybe grandpa and dad and you. And so those are the kinds of things that are going to be meaningful to you in the future that are also so meaningful to the people with whom you're taking those photos. And the last one I think I just want to highlight, we've got a whole list here, but like we say, we'll publish it later. Thinking about your thank you cards. And we mentioned this last week if you caught our talk about thank you card etiquette, but maybe taking a special photo with the specific goal of putting it on your thank you cards. So maybe you have a sign that says thank you, or some kind of prop, or something that you're intending to specifically use on your thank you cards later is something you might want to add to that moments list.
Absolutely. I always love, and again, we're going to post a big list for everybody, but I personally love the shots of the getaway car. But again, sometimes it's difficult to find a package where your photographer is willing to, to stay until the very end, or maybe you just know your partner and yourself well enough where you're going to be the last ones on the dance floor, so it just doesn't make sense. But something about those tin cans behind a car, it still makes me so happy.
It is very, very cute. And if your photographer does happen to be there long enough, again, those golden hour, sunset, dark photos are some of our favorites. They can be so dramatic, especially if you're using some kind of backlighting. Some of my favorite dark photos are backlit dark photos in the rain or in the snow. I mean, if it's not raining or snowing, I'm not wishing that on you, but if it does happen, it doesn't have to be the worst thing in the world. You can get some pretty cool photos that way.
Definitely.
So, Jacqueline, do you want to maybe just talk a little bit about how you converse with your photographer about
Yeah,
these
absolutely.
wants and wishes?
As Amy mentioned at the very start, we are not photographers. We are not editors. We are not models. We have very little to do with your wedding photos apart from making sure that you have the time to do it. But what we can't stress enough is be clear, be concise, and set your priorities with your photographer, but also recognize that they do this for a living. So finding a correct way to explain what you want without coming across as maybe pushy or a little bit too precise with what you want in your list is a fine line to be balancing. But the big one comes down to just communicating what's important to you and who is
Mhm.
important to you. So being open and honest with those priorities by saying, hey, parents are really important to us. I don't have a solid relationship with my aunts or uncles, so not a big deal if we can't get those photos, but these are the needs, these are my wants, these are my absolutely no ways, no matter what, don't let me get a photo with that human being. Granted, I can't imagine if you're not getting a photo with a human being that they'd be invited to your wedding, but again, no judgment, no opinions, just being clear and open and honest with what you want is your best policy, but also being prepared and being open to be charged that additional time. Like Amy said, you will need to set aside maybe 45 minutes to an hour completely just for details, whether it's in the morning, afternoon, or the whole day. You have to be willing and ready for that sacrifice. But again, if photos are a huge priority to you, it likely won't seem like a sacrifice. You understand that there's time, that there's energy, and that there's a lot of care and love in these photographers' packages. So never scoff at the idea that having to spend a little bit of extra for somebody's additional time, chances are they're doing it because they want to be doing it anyways. They already have a list of great moments in their mind. They just want to make sure that they can accommodate your wishes. And also, like we said, recognizing that they are the pro. So if they say, we can do this, but you need to do a first look, I can't fit this in, then you'll also have to be receptive to the idea of doing a first look or adding extra time. Now, Amy and I talk about it all the time. We are huge fans of first looks, not only from an emotional standpoint where you get the chance to kind of mellow out a little bit before the ceremony, your partner gets an opportunity to see you. It also opens a wide range of opportunity for what photos can be done before the ceremony and after to accommodate for that extra time that you might need for those photos.
And we know that you're, in most cases, hiring a professional who is going to come with their own spin on things. And we do encourage you to defer to their professional judgment. But we also know that photography is not a huge priority with everybody. And maybe you are using a friend to do your photos, or maybe you're using a less experienced photographer to maybe save some money, in which case you might just need to be willing to give them a little bit more guidance. If you've got a seasoned pro, I'm going to reiterate what I said at the beginning. Don't tie their hands by giving them a minute by minute shot list. Give them some suggestions, give them some, maybe a couple of sort of samples of the kind of photos that you like. But again, it's not going to serve you or them well if you're just trying to replicate somebody else's photos that you saw on Pinterest.
So,
So, sorry, go ahead.
sorry, I was going to say, even starting right at the beginning, you've likely looked on their social medias, their website, you have an idea of their style already. So going in with the expectations as well, not saying that you're locked into that photographer's style, but there was an initial reason why you were drawn to them. So remembering what that initial reason was as well, despite the months or the years that you've had on Pinterest to get some ideas, recognize where their certain skill set lies and why you chose them for that reason.
Absolutely. So, as always, we encourage you, if you have questions or comments, to plug them in now or If you're watching us on the replay, don't hesitate to send us a DM or an email, either amy@unmistakably.you.com or jacqueline@unmistakably.you.com. We are always happy to chat, and especially about photography. It's one of our, I may not be able to take good photos, but I certainly appreciate looking at good photos and being able to go back. I have photos from the past 12 years of weddings that I still go back and I remember the moments of that couple's wedding and how great it was and how much I enjoyed, their decor style or their attention to detail. It's something that always your vendors will be very appreciative of, and you will as well in the future. So, thank you for joining us today. And we are here every week, Sunday at 1 o'clock. Next week, as we get into the season of gift giving, we are talking about all things wedding gifts. So, favors and wedding party, proposal packages, gifts to your wedding party on the day. We're going to give you some really fun ideas and ways to make it personal for you and your wedding party and your guests as you give small gifts, thanking them for their attendance at your wedding and for their gift of time and energy in being in your bridal party and at your wedding. So join us next Sunday at 1 o'clock to talk about gifts and favors. And until then, have an amazing week.
Yes. Go play in the snow.
Or go get a blanket and a hot chocolate and watch a holiday movie. I watched Holiday on Netflix last night, and it wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. Not the worst thing I've ever seen. I stayed awake for the whole movie, which doesn't happen that often.
I was going to say, maybe I'll do that after I play in the snow.
There's one that we noticed that I was not allowed to watch last night that was called something like Holiday Wedding Planner or something like that.
It's also been banned in my home. So if anyone watching wants to invite us over so we can watch it.
We should just go to the studio and watch it together.
It's decided. We'll do movie nights. Stay tuned. We'll start planning those for everyone.
All right, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Bye, everybody.